Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith from Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Monday morning, May the 30th, and I'm glad to be here. Memorial Day down in the States. A happy Memorial Day to everybody down there. And, I'm glad to be here doing these shows. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room's open, and we'll pop the link in there what I want to continue talking about. And for about the last 3 weeks or so, we've been looking at some web pages from Robert Burney, called Joy to You and Me from healing.about.com. And he's a codependency therapist. He's a spiritual teacher. He's an author. He's written a book called Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls. It's a great bunch of web pages there, so I hope everybody will check it out, especially dealing with codependency and whatnot, and the internal child, and looking through grief work, and talking about a lot to do with boundaries and relationships and whatnot. And it's good information for people, like myself, adult survivors of child abuse, right? And so hopefully, people are getting something out of it. I know I am. I learn something every time I go through these web pages, and some of the stuff relates to me, and some of it I don't relate to, but it doesn't matter because it's good to take a look at it. So thanks everybody for being here. Excuse me. I really appreciate it. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a private person, just doing my own shows here on Blog Talk Radio, and I'm just a survivor of child abuse. And I wanted to, I'm on my healing journey. I started this 4 years ago, and about a year and a half ago, I started doing Blog Talk Radio, and I just wanted to be one more voice out here speaking out against abuse and standing up for child rights. And also, I decided to do this show, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, because I know there's a lot of survivors out there, and I just thought, I'll be one more voice out here for people, just to add to other voices who are speaking, to adult survivors, and trying to be a bit of an encouragement. I know for myself, I rely on other people for that encouragement, and so, I thought I'd like to do that for other people, So you have to listen at your own discretion to all of my shows, because I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive subject, and if it makes you uncomfortable, you have to turn the show off. It is your discretion to listen to all my shows. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show from a parent, somebody. Hopefully you have a parent who cares. I know that I didn't, so it's possible, right, that people don't have parents who care about them, kids and stuff. But if you have somebody in life who's older who can help you make a decision whether you should be listening to the show or not, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I just feel like children should be protected at all times. So if you don't know how to do that, keep yourself safe online. Type in your browser, online safety for children, internet safety, things like this, and that'll bring you to websites that will show you how to keep yourself safe online. You really need to learn how to do that. So have permission to listen to my show if you're under the age of 18. Thanks very much. So we'll get right into this morning, and this is really, codependency is kind of an interesting topic and subject for me, just mainly because I didn't really know what it was, until probably about this last year that I've started to learn what codependency really is and what it means. I had people tell me that, my family was codependent and whatnot, and I just didn't know what it was, So until I started looking into it to see what is codependency and what is codependent behavior and whatnot. So it certainly is interesting to see, taking a look at this stuff, just how codependent my family was, my parents and my siblings and stuff like that. So I'm still learning. So as I go through these web pages, I'm learning too, right? So that's what we're going to pick up where we left off on Friday, and that is looking at Robert Burney's web pages from Joy to You and Me. This particular page is called "What is Codependency? Codependence" by Robert Burney, Burney, and this is from Joy to You and Me, and it's good stuff. I'm going to pop the link in the chat room right now, and I have my good friend Gypsy Witch there. Hello, Gypsy Witch. Oh, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I know because you got a busy day, and it's nighttime in Australia there, so it's nice for you to join me. I appreciate it because I love you. And so we'll get right into this. What is codependency? We've already taken a look at this one, but we'll just kind of run through it again. And he does have excerpts from his book, pieces from his book in here. So I hope everybody will check this out. And I've never read Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls by Robert Burney, but I'd like to get a hold of that book. It'd be quite interesting to read the whole book. He's got pieces of it here, so it's quite good stuff. I hope everybody will check it out. So he says that codependency is at its core a dysfunctional relationship with self. And we went over this on Friday. He says, we do not know how to love ourselves in healthy ways because our parents did not know how to love themselves. and that's if we had parents who were, dysfunctional and codependent and whatnot, and may not have taught us how to do these things. You know what I mean? Like I know that in my case, I was talking about it on Friday. My parents didn't show any love towards each other and didn't show any really love towards their children, so we never really learned how to do that ourselves as children. So when we grew up, it's just kind of something you have to learn. So I started watching other people. I was talking about that on Friday. I was have to mimic other people. I was actually watching other people, like friends of mine, whose families seemed to be so much different than mine. There was no violence, there was no hatred. As far as I could tell, they were at their homes many times. Never saw anybody screaming at each other, throwing things at each other, beating on each other, hurting each other, calling each other names. I never saw that, so I was like, wow. And I mean, these people's parents would like sit on the couch together, which is unheard of in my home. My parents never ever sat close to each other, and like from the time I was born, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't think they did much of that, because my sister, who's 18 years older than me, would tell me stuff that they never did that. They weren't like this loving couple that would hold hands and walk down the road together. They were always at war. Like they were at war from day one, and they were at war, pretty much until my mom passed away. So, it's just they didn't know how to be this loving couple. Their parents were not like that. My grandparents, I'm sure of it. My grandfather was mom's mom was her abuser, not her dad. My mom loved her dad very much, and so my grandfather, I never met him. He was dead long before I was born. But his wife, my grandmother, was this horrible woman who he was afraid of, and he would literally go and hide, like on the farm. He'd be really busy all the time, hiding and working, because he wanted to stay away from her. But in that sense, he didn't protect his children, and I think that's why my mother had this thing against men, because she loved her dad very much, but when my dad was doing what he was doing, which was abusing her and not treating the children right, my mom, she just didn't have a good view of men, because her dad didn't protect her from her mother, and then here's this man that she marries that she thinks is going to bring some peace and goodness into her life, marries her, and it turns out that he can't do that because he's mentally ill and he's got all kinds of problems, my dad, and so he didn't know how to treat her right. So she just, I think her view of men was pretty bad. But they didn't have any normal, what I would consider to be normal relationships. They just didn't have any normal relationships with anybody except for neighbors and stuff. They could be nice to neighbors, they could be good to people. They, my parents had some friends on the street that we were living on for many years, that they'd go over for coffee and hang out and stuff like that, and they'd come home and they'd battle it out. It's like that was just what they did. So they knew how to behave at other people's homes, and sometimes they would get into little fights that would be quite embarrassing, but they wouldn't go into an all full-fledged war at somebody else's home. They'd wait till they got home, and then they would just start their stuff all over again. So they knew how to behave when they needed to. You know what I mean? Kind of bizarre, but that the whole dysfunctional relationship with self is quite often caused because we didn't see a healthy relationship growing up. So I didn't see any healthy relationships growing up at all until I started watching other people and other outside of my family and other people's parents, and I started to realize, wow, there's just such a huge difference between my parents and these people. Like this is really quite interesting. As I started to take note, and I was like, I think I'm gonna pay attention here, because I was noticing things were so much better at a lot of my friends' homes. Not at all of them, but at some of them. So, I started to watch their behaviors and tried to learn some of that stuff. Because he says, as children, we were taught, he says, we were taught to determine our worth in comparison with others. And if we are smarter than, prettier than, better grades than, faster than, etc., then we were validated and got the message that we had worth. So in society has a big part to play in this too, as far as how we see ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. So I was talking about that on Friday quite a bit. So we'll just kind of scroll down to here. And he says that codependency is a particularly vicious form of delayed stress syndrome. He kind of sort of detailing out what codependency is. So he says, instead of being traumatized in a foreign country against an unidentified enemy during a war, soldiers who have delayed stress are, we were traumatized in our sanctuaries by the people we love the most. So that's our families, right? Or somebody close to us, right? So says the soldier has to shut down emotionally in order to survive in a war zone. We had to shut down emotionally because we were surrounded by adults who were emotional cripples of one sort or another. I think that's quite interesting. Because I mean, lots of survivors I've heard, have compared, like with PTSD and post-traumatic stress disorder, is comparable to war vets, people who've gone to war, come back and end up with the, PTSD and other problems. Abused children go through the same thing, and depending on how long, the abuse or the dysfunction goes on, it could go on for years and years and years, and its small child's mind is just, warped. I mean, it's like, you take a perfectly healthy 20-year-old man, a 20-year-old young man, and you send him off to war. Let's say he had a great childhood, and he had a wonderful childhood, and he was treated properly and loved and everything. He goes off to war, comes back with these severe problems with PTSD and whatnot, other problems, then, you think, well, if he gets some help, he'll be all right. But his foundation when he was young was good because he had good, loving parents. When you take a small child, 0 years old to, 20 years old, living in abuse and dysfunction and whatnot, and having to try to figure out how to behave properly as an adult, and plus having these symptoms of PTSD and all this, it's really, really tragic, and it's hard on kids. You know what I mean? I know myself, like I had the most warped ideas, especially in my preteen years. You know what I mean? Like my mind was just, I had to start doing drugs just to remain sane. I mean, and that's really bad because that's not a good thing, right? But in order for me to maintain some sort of control in my life, because had no control over my body, I had no control over my life. Period. You know what I mean? My parents were just doing whatever they wanted to me, and a sibling was sexually using me for a little while there. And I was like, I had to have some control in my life, and my mind was just warped from this years of listening to these people and their garbage, putting on me their emotional, psychological, verbal, physical garbage on me. And I remember being about 11, 12 years old and just, in junior high and whatnot, and I was really struggling. And you know what I mean? It's hard on a kid. It's really, really hard. So I know so many survivors who've been through this, you know what I mean? And, then you have to kind of try to, as a young person, try to make it, and try to fit in. And it's really hard to fit in with the groups at school when your mind is just so much different than everybody else's. You know what I mean? Like I was always concerned whether somebody was going to be killed in my home when I got home, or whether I was going to be beaten on when I got home. These types of things, just running through my mind. I didn't do well at school, and I didn't make close relationships. I didn't make close friends. I had a couple of close friends who I trusted, and the rest I just didn't try to enter into any kind of after school activities or anything like that. I wasn't encouraged to do so. And so, I had a couple of really good friends, which is a good thing. But, I just didn't do any of the normal stuff that most kids would do, go to dances or, do things after school, like be involved in band or anything like that, any after school sport or anything like that. I wouldn't have even known how to fit in with the groups, you know what I mean? Because they're talking about normal things, you know what I mean? And in my mind was full of the most bizarre, crazy stuff because of what my parents have been putting me through for 11, 12 years, and watching my siblings, and having to deal with them too. And so, yeah, it's pretty crazy what that does to a person's mind. And it took me a long time to get any kind of normalcy in my life. And it wasn't because of a family member or anybody else trying to help me out. It was just that I decided that I didn't want to live that life. I decided I wanted a different life. I was like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. You know what I mean? I'm tired of the violence, and I'm tired of the abuse. I'm tired of the garbage. And at the age of about 21, I stopped doing drugs and decided to start doing something with myself. But it took me to about 25 to decide to go to school. It took me a long time to sort of get my mind straightened up from what my parents had done to me my whole life. You know what I mean? It was absolutely horrific. And then it took me it's taken me forever to get here where I am today. It's taken my whole life, and that's what they say, right? But I mean, I didn't even start my healing journey until about 4 years ago. And so, but I'm in such a much better place now than I was. But this is the thing, this is how serious this stuff is. People may think that this stuff doesn't really, affect people, but it certainly does. It has a huge effect on people. Even if there was no abuse in the family, and it's just codependent and dysfunctional, it's still extremely hard on young people and on children to have to grow up in that, and to have to then learn to that some of their behaviors are not appropriate and that they do need to change them. So I had to like really work double time to try to get try to be as healthy as I can be, especially mentally healthy, and with not with it changed some of my belief systems. You know what I mean? So it's kind of hard if you don't know what's a healthy belief system. And so I've had to do a lot of work just to catch up to where most people just naturally are, because they've had a healthy belief system and they felt good about themselves, and they weren't they weren't dragged down to the I say the pits of hell. You know what I mean? It's hard to come up to that level just to be where everybody else is. You know what I mean, at this point. But I'd say I'm really close, and I'd say if I don't think I'm there yet, but I seriously think that I'm really close, because I feel so much better now than I ever did, and I think it's just from doing this work and actually allowing myself to go to deal with these things when I need to deal with them. So it's really good. But I know for a lot of people who are still sitting over on the other side there, you just have to keep going, because like that's the thing I told myself 4 years ago, is that I was going to allow myself to heal. I actually had to give myself permission. I was like, okay, I'm going to heal. I'm going to allow myself to get help. And if I'm struggling, then I'm going to get professional help. I decided I'm just not going to allow myself to spiral downward and destroy my life because my parents set up this life for me, when made me play this role in this victim role, and set up this belief system for me that I would want to kill myself so many years later. You know what I mean? I thought that's all from my parents. I thought, why am I even doing this? So I had to really search out my behaviors and my ways of thinking and say, what am I doing and why am I doing this? And when I started asking the questions is when I started getting better, because I started to realize that this had nothing to do with me. It was my parents' dysfunction, my parents' abuse, and I was just a sponge there, just soaking it up. It wasn't really my fault. None of these things were my fault. So that's the issue. But then again, as an adult, it is my responsibility, and it is our responsibility to, as adults, that we can no longer blame this stuff on anybody. We have to do the work to get better. It doesn't do any good for me to sit around and say, well, I'm just going to, that's what I was doing. I was just saying, I'll just destroy my life because my parents destroyed it for me so many years ago. And then I'd sit around and say, well, it was their fault. And then, of course, me not taking responsibility for my adult life. And then, sit there and say, well, I'm not going to heal, and I'm just going to be miserable and, exist here on this planet for as long as I'm going to exist here. And really, I didn't realize that it was going to have to be me to change that. I was hoping somebody else could do it for me, but, as soon as I realized it was me, that was going to have to make those changes and make those behavioral changes, belief system changes, start believing in myself, start loving myself, that was never going to happen. So that's the whole issue. I can't really blame that stuff, my life now, on my parents. I can blame them for what they did, and I certainly hold them accountable for everything that they did to our family, to me, to themselves, to each other. But the thing is as an adult now, sitting here at the age of 45, and in this relationship with my 16-year relationship with my sweetheart, I can't sit there and blame where I'm at right now on them. You know what I mean? Because that's my choice. And that's the whole thing. I mean, I've pretty much done what I wanted to in life. I always have, and especially since I got away from my parents, and decided that this is my life, and I'm actually really happy. And especially now that I've done this healing work, because now I feel at peace with myself. Because I didn't know that 4 years ago. Like, I didn't have any peace in my heart at all. Like, no peace in my life and no peace in my heart. I mean, my sweetheart brought me peace because that, but he couldn't go in there and fix all this stuff. You know what I mean? He didn't even know where it would be inside of there. You know what I mean? It was inside of me, and I had to allow myself to see it and work through it. And he's been supportive through the whole thing, but he really couldn't do much to help me to get through this stuff, except for to be there for me, which was awesome. And so that's what, not everybody has somebody like in their life that will do that for them. And I mean, you have to hang in there, because there are some dark, bad days. You know what I mean? Even people who are not abused experience bad times. You know what I mean? It's kind of ridiculous to think that the world is just great, and only because we were abused we're the only ones suffering. I mean, that's really stupid to even think that. Like, there's lots of people out there who were not abused as children, who are having times and bad days and bad things happen to them. But it's just when you have been abused, it tends to feel so much. It's so much worse, it seems, because that little person inside is still grieving and still hurting. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. That's why I think it's really important to allow ourselves to get help and to to work through this stuff. If we have to have a counselor, therapist, whatever, group support, online group support, doesn't matter. But just as long as you get some help, you know what I mean? Because there's better days on the other side. I like Bill Murray's show here on Blog Talk Radio. I hope everybody will go check it out. It's called SCAN, Stop Child Abuse Now. And that's Bill Murray and Jessica Stevens and a whole lot of other people, including a psychotherapist, and there's some other people on there. But that's they're the National Association for the Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, NAASCA.org, and that's Stop Child Abuse Now on Blog Talk Radio. And you can find it by just typing in www.blogtalkradio.com/Bill, BILL, hyphen Murray, URRAY. He's got a show on there. He's got an awesome show, Monday through Friday. It's like an hour and a half long. Then he does a weekend show on Sunday for 2 hours where he has a psychotherapist and whatnot come on there. This guy who just voluntarily comes on to talk to people if they want to get help. This is a great show for people who are adult survivors who are really looking for, some. It's like a group support, really. It's on Blog Talk Radio. And you can go there and you can be part of this whole thing. You can call in and talk, or you can be in the chat room anonymously, whatever you want to do. And there's just all kinds of places now for people to get help. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to be alone in this. You don't have to suffer alone in this. That's the thing. 4 years ago, I was really alone in this, and I really didn't want to bother my sweetheart with it, so I wouldn't tell him a whole lot of stuff. You know what I mean? And because I didn't want to bring him down. And he's terminally ill, so you don't want to, you don't want to be bringing people down. You know what I mean? It's like he's already has enough on his plate. And so, 4 years ago, I was just dealing with the stuff on my own and sitting in a very dark, dark place. And so when I decided to allow myself to heal, I was like, man, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this anymore. I was like, I can no longer allow my parents to destroy my life. They certainly had a good time trying when I was young, and they certainly, the leftover garbage that they left me certainly was still working at me all the time to try to take me out of this world, because it was my my parents were mentally ill, and so they were always talking about suicide and killing themselves, and two of my brothers killed themselves, and I was always contemplating suicide and thinking it was an option, right? And it's not an option. I just think that people should live. Hey, we're here. So I decided, okay, no more of that. I decided I would never ever even have another thought about it, and so I haven't, and that's 4 years later. So I'm in a better place now, but that's because I've allowed myself to get help and to do some work and get help. So whatever way it is for you, because we're all different, right? You have to make sure that you reach out and get some help with it, like I was saying, whether it's counselors, one-on-one counseling, therapy, group support, online group support if you prefer to remain anonymous, that type of stuff. It's just so good to reach out to people and get some help. I remember when I started, I was with a group, a child abuse survivor group, and it was an online group support, and you could be anonymous on there. And I got on there, and it was so good to talk to people who total validation. We're talking total validation, because nobody in my family would validate. My siblings, the ones that are still living, there's a couple. I have a sister and a brother still living, and they'll talk about the abuse, they'll talk about the past and stuff, but they're not on a healing journey. So they don't think there was anything, they just think it's no deal that my mom bashed my head in and tried to kill me and used to curse at me and beat me up and spit in my face and stuff and slap me around. And, it was just hateful to me all the time, right? They just think that was okay, right? And they know that my dad used to rape my mother, and they don't think there's anything wrong with that. Right? So that's why I'm not really on the same plane with them. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you people, I don't know, their ways of looking at things are very warped and twisted, and that's because they grew up in the same home I did. But they're not on any kind of a healing journey. You know what I mean? Like they just don't. They know what I do for Dream Catchers for Abused Children. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dream Catchers for Abused Children, and they just don't like it at all, because it makes them face what they had to go through as a child. Every time they think about the fact that I'm out here fighting to stop child abuse, it pisses them off, because they're just like, well, they don't want to face their own past, is what it is, right? My sister likes to live in some sort of weird pretend world, and my brother is just hateful. So I don't know if there's any hope for that guy. But the thing is They all have to make their own way. They have to make their own journey, and that we're not on the same journey. So that's just it. Like, I mean, it was great to have validation from this group, this survivor group, because I got on there and I was able to talk to people that had been through similar things as me, not the same, but similar. And, you know, we were able to talk, and I was able to get some validation, you know, whereas my family's in, you know, not denial, but they're not accessible. They're not available to talk about stuff, you know what I mean? So, you know, many times adult survivors don't have anybody to talk to. And I think that's a big issue. You know, I was sitting around by myself 4 years ago just thinking, man, this sucks. You know, I was just so alone. Even though I had this wonderful man in my life, this little person inside of me, this little inner child was still so down, so angry, so feeling so rejected, you know what I mean? And that little person, that wasn't my sweetheart's fault. That was my parents' fault for doing that to me as a young child. And so that's why I think it's important to reach out and make sure that you do get some help, you know, because I'm sure if my sweetheart could help me out, he would have, and he even says it, you know, that if he knew how to help me, he would have done it. And I told him, I said, honey, you can't do that for me. I have to do it myself, right? There's no way he could reach in there not even knowing what that little child looks like or went through, and really and be the what do you want to call it, the one to you know, the one to validate the whole thing, you know what I mean, or to make her feel better. I mean, he makes, you know, for me as an adult, it's great. I mean, we have a wonderful relationship, but that little person inside of me, the only one who really can reach her is me, you know, and I'm the one that needs to go in there and let her know that she's fine and everything's okay, and that she's beautiful, she's loved, and that she was wanted, and that she does matter and she does count. You know, and that's talking to myself so many years ago, you know, when I was really suffering as a child. And I think that, you know, that's the problem with child abuse. Many people just think child abuse, you know, what is child abuse? A spank? You know, it's like, give me a break. Come on, man. We're talking about total degradation, total destruction of a human soul and spirit. It's not even just the body. You know, I mean, my body was trashed too, but it's that stuff is not what bothers me. It's what the damage that was done to my spirit and my soul. You know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about. Severe and physical abuse will cause that. A lot of people think that you know, physical abuse doesn't have anything to do with psychological or emotional problems, and it certainly does. Because, you know, along with physical abuse is always present, and child sexual abuse, there's always psychological damage and emotional damage done because of it. And there's a whole lot of people out there that don't really know what they're talking about, saying, oh, well, child sexual abuse doesn't cause any problems with the psyche. And too, you know, I don't know, you know, there are people out there saying stuff like this, and they're incredibly wrong. And there's a whole lot of other psychoanalysts and psychologists and whatnot who are out there saying different, and who've been saying different forever, because they've talked to enough people to know that what it does to a child and what it does to a person. And so that's why, you know, we have to make sure we get some help and not allow ourselves to be in this on our own. We've already been on our own for so long as that little inner child, you know, suffering and not getting any help. And I think that's where adult survivors really have an issue, is to allow themselves to reach out. So, you know, I would just say do whatever you can to reach out, you know. I mean, even just, you know, a group support, even online group support is good, because, I mean, I did that, and it was really very helpful for me to talk to people who were like-minded, and they were like, you can do this, we can do this. You know, it's such an encouraging thing to have people in your life. You know, I have, you know, some of the best friends in my life, and that's the thing, you know. I mean, where I'm lacking in my family, you know, as far as my family goes, you know, I don't really have a family, but I do, because of my friends. I have a lot of friends who I consider my family. And so, yeah, this is just, you know, it's really culture. It says all abuse is traumatic. The age at the abuse often dictates the depth. The depth predicates the treatment. And Gypsy Witch says that's so important, that it is yourself to do it for her. Yeah, that's right. We have to do this for our inner child. You know what I mean? We have to allow ourselves to get help so that we can heal and be well. So thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate it, and I just love you all, Gypsy Witch, and thanks for my culture for being here. And have a great day, everybody. I'll be around later on tonight if you want to leave me a message on Blog Talk Radio. I usually check my messages every day. And have a great day. I'll be back on tomorrow, same time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m. And we'll pick up where I left off there. I just wanted to kind of just chit chat this morning. Take good care of yourselves, everybody. Hang in there. Do not ever give up. Not ever. You keep on going. There's better days, but we have to make sure we stick around for them, right? So hang in there and make sure, if you can't cope, you call a crisis line. I don't care what you have to do, but you stick around and you make sure you get some help, right? So we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.